Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. For new listeners, Magical Learning is a podcast that's a training and facilitation company that has been working for over 25 years and has partnered with global thought leaders like Robin Sharma and John Mattone. As you may have seen in the title, we don't have a guest this week, which is interesting. So we've got a little team podcast, which is always fun. We love to get the opportunity to do these once in a while. So I'm here, and it's me with our Director of Learning, Danette. Danette, how are you going this week? How's things?
Yeah, good, Jez. It's been a very busy week, and tomorrow I'm off to Ghana. So that will be fun, overseas for a couple of weeks. So I won't be on the podcast for the next 2 weeks after today.
And you're going on a bit of a whirlwind tour.
I am. So Ghana, Switzerland, Portugal, and the UK, and then back again. So, and bit of work, in fact, mostly work, and then a little bit of time off at the end of the trip. So, yeah, it'll be good.
Yeah, so we're very excited to hear how the trip went after all that. But no, very excited to have you on today, Danette.
Thanks, Jez. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Now, we haven't done a concept sandbox in a while. So I was thinking we can do one today, just sort of as a little side bit to what we'll be talking about. So a concept sandbox is actually an idea where we like to look at sort of topics in business and life, but what's more fun than that is having a little fantasy element to it. So usually we like to throw in a fantastical idea because we could use Apple as an example, but we don't want to get sued. So why not use a fantastical world where the business problem may be the same, but yes, it gives us a lot of fun on the way. So Danette, did you want to tell us a little bit about what is a fantastical realm maybe we could set ourselves in?
Oh, geez, that's a great question, and I didn't prep for this.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We can try and think of one.
That's good.
All right, I've actually got one. Okay, so Danette, I was thinking for this week, why don't we do Iron Man, aka Tony Stark? People might be a fan of him, but what he's doing this week is he wants to upgrade his suit. Okay, he wants to update to a new type of tech, but he doesn't know how to approach that problem. There's so many options. How does he even start to look at that? And I guess that's going to ask us a lot of questions. So that's going to be something we'll be percolating on in the background, but I think perfectly for this week, our topic is actually related, which is Waze tech surprised us. So we're going to be talking about that, and I think these will integrate nicely. So if you don't understand how this is going to go, don't worry, hang in there, and it'll all make sense in a second. We'll be having a bit of fun and be talking a little bit of business and life. So Danette, did you want to kick us off with a little bit about your topic, about Waze tech have surprised you?
Yeah, so I'm, as you children often remind me, as old as dirt. So I remember pre-tech. So I remember before mobile phones where you actually literally had a phone that was attached to the wall and you would dial on a rotary dial up people. So when mobile phones came in, they were bricks. And then they got smaller and smaller. And originally they were really just for phone calls. And then obviously if we look at today's phones, they pretty much do anything, and they are super small. I do remember a funny story when they first came out. Someone told me there was this guy in a restaurant down the south coast talking really loudly on his big brick mobile phone, and halfway through the conversation, the phone rang. So he was just pretending. And then I think someone got the shits with him, so they actually picked it up and threw it in the fish tank in the restaurant. So that was what happened in the early days. But I was thinking, when it first came in, it was quite a novelty. Like I remember we had one of the first personal computers in our suburb in Sydney. And we played Pac-Man, and it was really, really basic. And there was a Star Wars type one, which had just a star, as in the ones you see on your computer.
A little asterisk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was really basic. You'd use the arrow keys to move and the space bar to hit things. So it was super, super basic. And now I look at it and, it's gone from it's a novelty to it's an everyday part of our lives now, technology, and every day we take on more tech. So I think it went from being something that surprised us to now it's part of our life. And actually what we need to do is sometimes step away from it to connect back with life, not just technology. And I was listening to Oprah this morning. She interviewed the brother and sister who were co-founders with, I think, 5 other people on Anthropic, so which
Mhm.
does Claude and stuff like that. And that was one of the messages they had that, one of the things they hope that AI actually helps people do is actually, use it for, you know, getting suggestions and that, but then using it actually to connect with people. Because I was sort of saying social media,
Mm.
actually now people connect via looking at the phone rather
Mm.
than looking at the person next to them. So that was a really interesting discussion. And a couple other things, Jez, and then
Oh,
I'm going to
hold on,
ask.
wait, no, I reckon let's just pause there for a second. Let's start with what you've got there, because I think you've already given us something to sort of kick off with here.
Okay,
So
thanks,
with
Jez.
I think the theme with both of these so far is that what was the original concept from what it was to what it is now is a much more advanced, and there's a
Yeah,
lot more going on when we're looking
yeah,
at phones, when we're looking at PCs.
yeah.
And so perhaps when we return this to Iron Man, perhaps something we can be thinking about is when you're looking at the options for what's available, maybe it isn't necessarily what's the most efficient or best, but maybe the one that provides more features that you haven't even thought of or thinks outside the box with the Iron Man suit. What do you think?
I like that. Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, I'm already thinking. So,
Mhm.
when we wear clothes, what's one of the things we have to do? We have to take them off and wash them,
Mhm.
and we have to wash ourselves. What if this new Iron Man suit actually does it all while he's in there? So he gets his own wash and the suit doesn't need to go off to the dry cleaners or whatever, cause it is self-cleaning. Now, who wouldn't like clothes like that?
This is the pitch meeting you're doing to Tony Stark right now.
Exactly.
That's it. No, that's great, Danette. I think that this is the thing. He probably hasn't even thought of this kind of stuff, but these are the little touches
Yes,
that turn it into something a lot more efficient. Because then, in theory, that could also be a moment where he's also just washing himself as he's getting out of the suit, ready for a night or something.
exactly.
Yeah.
And you know how our brain, when we are like in the shower and stuff, and we're just standing there staring around at the water flowing down,
Mm.
and we get great ideas. Maybe that feature actually then, and Tony Stark's super smart
Mhm.
already. Maybe it gives him a little bit of space so that his brain can come up with new ideas as well. So it could be like it's cleaning him, it's cleaning the suit. It's a little bit like meditative so that his brain gets into flow and he can come up with some new ideas.
Mm. Good thinking. All right. Well, Danette, you had some more ideas there. So do you want to
Yes.
share some of your other thoughts on
Yeah. And
ways tech surprised us? So hopefully people are seeing how a concept sandbox works now. Let's
yes.
keep going, Danette.
So one of the and I used AI for this because I was like, okay, what are some other things that tech does? So one of the things is impact on us. So whether it's positive or not so positive, and one of the big ones is sleep.
Mm.
So if you think historically, we'd get on devices, the blue screen would keep our brain awake, etc. And now we're using devices to monitor our sleep, so they're sort of helping with that. But some people are also still staying up late and so getting that hit from their devices with the blue screen and stuff like that. Um, some of the other ways that I think are super important. So when I think of how technology has helped people who may not be able to, and I think of me earlier this year when I got sick and my eyes
Mm.
weren't so great, to be able to help me see better.
Mm.
So, for people that may have different, whether it's afflictions, whether it's disabilities, etc. And I don't like that word disability. I'm sure there's a much better word for that. It can help us to be able to lead an everyday life because
Mm.
I know without technology, I would have really struggled till
Mm.
my eyes got better. And, I can only imagine what that's like for someone who is potentially has sight impairment
Mm.
as as a lifetime thing.
Mm.
So I think from that side, it's been able to help people with disabilities, etc. Um, and I'll leave that for you to talk a little bit more. The other one is the algorithm. So the thing, like I deliberately, I reckon it was 30 plus years ago, stopped watching the news, listening to the news because I just found it impacted my energy. What I've noticed if I hop on some of the social media, and I don't do that very often, but what I notice is how the algorithms are really feeding me stuff. And I'm like, I'm not really happy that it's so narrow, and I
Mm.
know they're trying to sell me, so I get that. And it's like, actually, there must be better ways where we can broaden what we see. And I think that's probably where AI in some instances might be able to help us. And certainly when I was listening to the conversation Oprah had with the two siblings, that was one of the hopes that they talked about as well. So I think it's become too narrow, and I get why, because they want to market and sell stuff. But actually, my brain likes lots of variety, not this is what we think you need to see. So that side I don't enjoy as much, but it does surprise me how much it you look at stuff and then you go, oh, where are all these people I used to connect with? Where's their feeds gone? Isn't
Yeah,
on
yeah,
there?
yeah, yeah. So it's that's very interesting because you're talking about, like, in the first part, we're talking about some of the interesting growth, and this is what you're
Yes,
also still talking about is some of the growth, but some of it can be helpful or hinder. You know,
yeah,
if it's not careful. I think it's what you're kind of pointing to is an interesting idea around. This is the first time in history we've had to be very conscious about not taking on too much. Like
yes,
before, it didn't really matter because there wasn't too much to overwhelm you, but now you
yeah,
can be overwhelmed very easily. And so it's the first time really in history we've had to actually slow down with the technology, you know,
yeah,
which is a sort of a strange concept. And I don't think we haven't fully clocked that we're supposed to be doing this yet, or not everybody has. And I think we're all still working it out for ourselves, you know, the balance. Especially with that sleep thing, because we know sleep is
yeah,
a really important part, and it's one of those things that we know it's important, but it's like it feels like eating vegetables. It's like something I'd like to do, but it's not always, it's not always going to be something I do.
yeah,
But then when you think about how technology's affected something that we didn't even think was something that could be
yeah,
impeded upon so
yes,
effectively, like it almost makes you think, like, you have those Sundays where you don't have technology. It makes you think like there's a real advantage to that because you sort of going back to a bit more of a natural cycle outside of this.
yes, yeah, yeah,
And I think also with the algorithm, it's really interesting. It's I think different platforms have different algorithms,
yeah,
and it's been shown, like I think YouTube's got a very intense one in terms of like
yeah,
you could just watch 5 videos and all of a sudden you could be going down a certain pathway. But
yes. Oh,
I just had a blackout, I think. But that's okay. Am I, for those watching the video, I've just gotten a little darker. I think it doesn't really
yes.
matter though. Um, but what I was going to say is, so with the algorithm, one thing that has been very helpful though, I have found on TikTok specifically, I have been able to get really good embroidery
Awesome.
TikTok. So
Yeah,
like but it requires a very conscious effort. Like you
yeah,
have to curate it like it's
yeah,
a plant that's growing out of control, and you have to be constantly monitoring it too.
yeah,
But I have found, because there's so many people are so amazing at art and
yes,
can put together a little video, and all of a
yeah,
sudden it's inspiring me to want to do more art or
yeah,
something like that. So
yes,
if it's done well and it's been intentional about how you curate it, it can open you up to some really interesting things. But if you just let it kind of direct you, I think that's where the algorithm can really take control of people if
yeah,
it's not that intentional.
yeah, 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 yeah. Love that.
Mm. Well, I might share some things
Yeah,
here
go,
because I want
Jez.
to talk about. Well, actually, hold on. Let's stop there, actually, Danette, before we go
Yeah,
further, because let's talk about Tony Stark and how these
okay.
things might fit in. So let's start here. Maybe is there something to do with sleep that this suit could help with?
Yeah, so I reckon, and this tech's probably already available, but
Mm,
I'm not sure it's in Suits, is really monitoring where his body is at. And, not even the sleep, the circadian rhythms,
mm,
to think about when he does the really important stuff as much as possible, or if he's looking a little bit sleep deprived, you know, maybe cooling him down a little bit so he feels a little bit snoozy
mm.
and catches up on his sleep or has a quick nap. And how about that as a feature that, during the day, some people worry about whether they're going to wake up or sleep too long if they take a nap. So it could actually just have a timer that gently wakes him up when that nap gives him the optimal amount of sleep. So,
That's actually
yeah,
a great idea. So we've
yeah,
got a better way to shower and a better way to sleep already.
yeah.
I think the other thing that you're talking about is tech's ability to help people of all abilities.
Yes.
And I think that the suit itself makes a lot of sense for a lot of people that have different abilities or whatever,
Yeah.
because it really effectively acts as an exoskeleton. So you can
Yes.
kind of use,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
so
that,
that's already another advantage. If he gets injured or whatever, the suit actually can still help him, and it also could
yes.
be something that could be marketed in that kind of way.
Yeah.
And then finally, one thing that's interesting is in terms of the algorithm and we were talking about art, is there some cool, like, because if he's not going for camouflage,
Yeah.
so what kind of cool designs could we do? Like, let's have some fun with the design and see what we can kind of like
Oh, that was
colors, different things.
yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think?
I love that, Jez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking, what's that thing they do with the lights on famous places like the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Opera House and that? I can't remember what that festival's called, but it'd be a bit like that where, he could change it for art, but it could also be for, national days of recognition and stuff as well.
Yeah.
And instead of having to get new outfits, the outfit automatically does that. So we see less wastage. So it's more eco-friendly, etc. too.
There we go. Look at these. These are some ideas I need to take on board. Well, Danette, I wanted to jump over to some of the ways that tech
Yeah.
surprised me. And so I'm going to approach this from kind of three ways. One
Right.
is an old technology that I think is incredible, that I think everyone, even listening to this, will be shocked by or when they remember it. The next thing is a technology that I think we've always waited for and how much that hasn't impacted society. And then the third one is a way that tech has made things worse in an interesting way, but in a very specific situation.
Okay.
So I want to start with the old one, which is the classic thing that we've all heard, which is the Apollo 11 mission to the moon. The computing chips on that had about the equivalent of a modern day calculator.
Wow.
Maybe less than that. Actually, probably
Wow.
less than a modern day calculator. And so when you think of that, when you think about technology's capacity at that level, it's really incredible, and it's incredible what we can achieve with something so simple to get people to the moon. So, to me, that's one thing that I think when we think about that, it doesn't always have to be big and flashy. Is there a way that we can use what's already there to do things that we may not even feel possible right now?
Yes, love that. That's a great one.
Yeah. So that's the old one that I think is a great example. The new one that is an example of something where tech has surprised me in that I thought this was going to be a huge deal and it doesn't really matter is so the technology for flying cars has existed for about 4 years now, 5 years. And I think everybody listening to this, nobody's used one,
No.
And this was a technology that many people used as the sort of harbinger of the future. They'd say, we've got this, but we don't have flying cars, or, like this kind of thing. When am I going to get my flying cars? So we have them, but it's interesting because I think a lot of the concepts of flying cars seemed a lot safer than what this seems like. So with a flying car in the modern day system, they have a car that can fully drive like a normal car and then turn into a bit of a sort of drone, essentially.
Wow.
And fly. But the problem is drones, even though they are quite interesting as a technology, are subject to weather conditions, which are quite concerning. So, if it's a windy day, do you want to be in a flying car? The answer is probably not.
No.
And so what's fascinating to me is that technology surprised me in that I thought this would be a huge deal. We already have it, and people are not really feeling comfortable to use it, or the infrastructure's not really been built because it needs little helipads to land on and things like that. So, it's interesting. It might be more important in the future, but at the moment, it's certainly an interesting case of the future's here and nobody really wants it.
Using it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'd love to have one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Where I live.
Yeah, exactly. And then I wanted to sort of talk about a way that tech surprised me in that it's gotten worse. And this is specifically, I've mentioned this before, but I wanted to talk about video games and specifically what's interesting is how they've gotten less quote unquote fun, I would say. While the technology has improved and the gameplay in terms of how easy it is to play the game has gotten better, it is a less fun experience, in my opinion, to play a video game in 2026 than it was in the year 2005.
Yes.
And just to sort of give some people some context as to why I'm thinking that, back in 2005, a lot of games didn't take themselves very seriously because the graphics were not very good. So taking yourself very seriously kind of looked silly in an interesting way, though people did still do stuff like that. But it allowed for a lot of silly things. Like there was a lot of cheat codes where your character would just have a big head for no reason. It didn't make you better at the game. It'd make you worse at the game. Just a silly bit of whimsy, you could say.
Yes.
There were cheats that would give you moon physics, again, for no reason, just for
Yep.
like silliness.
Yes.
And a really good example for me, I've mentioned this example before, but I think it's a really good one, is Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3, which
Yes.
people, well, you probably have never heard of, but it's the highest rated game on the PlayStation 2, which is the most sold console ever. So
Yep.
in theory, it's the best game on the most sold console. And what's fun about that game is that it has really, like, it's got a lot of skateboard related missions. It's a skateboarding game. It's got a lot of, score this amount of points, do this particular trick. But it also has a lot of stupid goals in it. One of them is a goal called Get Chuck Unstuck, and it's set in Canada, and it's a guy who's licking a pole, and it's snowing, and his tongue is stuck to the pole, and you just have to bump into him. There's no reason for that goal. It
Yep.
doesn't make you better at the game. It
I
doesn't
know.
require any skill at all.
Yep.
But that was the kind of thinking that happened sort of around that sort of time
Nice.
frame. And when you think about games now, a lot of them are about a lot more about refining the gaming experience to making it better, because there's a lot more competitive gameplay. So
Yes.
gaming is taken more seriously. But what has happened with that is it's extracted some of the fun. And I think the best example of this is they've just remade Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 for the new
Yep.
consoles with new graphics. And even though it's the same game, and even though it's just got updated graphics, there's an interesting loss of its soul in a weird way, because even though they've tried to add new missions that kind of had that flavor,
Yep.
they don't really succeed, because the game feels more like they wanted to make a really good version of the game, as opposed to taking on the ethos of the game when it was originally created, which is, let's make this really stupid and have a bit of fun with it. So that's my sort of third example of how
Interesting.
technology hasn't necessarily, like, it's made things better, but not necessarily in a way that everybody appreciates.
Yeah, I love that, Jez.
Mm.
And so then how do we deliver some of that in Tony Hawk's?
Tony Stark,
Tony
Tony Hawk to
Hawk's
Tony Stark. Well, I mean, that could be
Tony
the
Stark,
answer right
yeah.
there. Maybe get him a skateboard that can pop out of the feet and
I love
do a
it.
little bit of skating. And I think, yeah, it's interesting because it improves on flying cars, the
Yes.
suit, because it feels
Yes.
safer in that it's a little
Yep.
bit more controllable. And maybe there's some lesson in the Apollo 11 part of what I was talking about, in that maybe, is there a way to get a lot more out of the
Yeah.
chips, and really, really think outside the box. And then I think in terms of the video games getting better, maybe this is the sort of antithesis, which is that just because people are making things more efficient or more refined,
Yep.
does it mean that it's still encapsulating the goal of what you actually wanted to do?
Yep.
Because those two things are not always connected.
Yeah. And I was thinking your fun bit's actually really important because our brain likes fun. And so I'm thinking, for Tony Stark, problem solving, having some fun things that the suit might take him through, little adventures and stuff, again, would help his brain stay really creative and open to new ways of solving some of the situations that he gets stuck in. So, yeah, anyway, that was... Now, I've got a couple more, Jez, because you prompted my brain. So can I
Great. No, let's go for them. Because let's see if we can really, I think we're almost building a business that we can pitch your mum. So if we can somehow get into a fictional universe.
One of the things, again, that was on the Oprah interview that I listened to this morning was how AI is probably going to help solve a heap of medical challenges that we haven't been able to solve by ourselves, because they can do the research and that much faster. And they were talking about how doctors, their skills are going to change, because AI will be able to help much better with the diagnostic, but it'll give doctors who currently say, I don't have time to actually be with my my patients and stuff, it'll give them time to actually be there and be present with people. So I think that's actually a really nice outcome when that happens. The other thing, and it was something I read today, where this researcher had done studies around typing versus writing and the impact on your brain. And they found that writing is actually way better for us. So, for kids particularly, but even for adults, when we write, all of your brain's involved, because everything you write actually requires your muscles, your fingers and stuff to do things. Whereas typing, and I'd never thought of it this way, but typing, where the keys are, so your brain actually doesn't light up very much at all, because you're just basically doing it by rote. And so they were saying that kids who've never learned to handwrite, actually struggle to tell when they read something that's handwritten, the difference between, say, an H and a B and stuff,
Mm.
and can struggle to write that because they've not actually developed those muscles. So I was like, that's interesting,
Mm.
because the other thing that was in the Oprah interview was about they didn't want kids to be on AI, and so they have a policy, I think it's 18 years before you can get on, and it actually will work out. So kids often come up on and go, "Can you tell me what's the best arthritis medicine?" Because they think then they'll fool it because it sounds like they're an old person, but then the next few questions sound like a kid, so it then basically sort of takes them off the platform. And I like, where organizations are thinking about the impact, whether it's the ethics, whether it's, are there biases in this? Is this going to impact on kids' brains and stuff like that as well? So I wonder, I think technology, some people will surprise us where they don't take that into account and they're just all about the money. And some, which I hope are way more sustainable, actually are thinking about those longer term issues, even though, we obviously haven't had technology long enough to really understand the impact on, say, for example, kids' brains and that. So
Mm.
yeah, they were two other things that came to mind as we were chatting, Jez.
Yeah, I mean, I think the handwriting, like, I'll come back to both of these,
Yeah,
but the handwriting thing's interesting because when you're saying that, it's actually made me realize that handwriting is really a form of drawing.
it is. Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's a fundamental difference between it and typing as well.
yes,
So it's like it's a different skill. It's learning how to sort of manipulate something to create an image. In this case, it's a
yes,
word, but it is still something that you're drawing.
yes,
And so, yeah, let's think about this. I think with the medical angle here, that part I think you've already sort of softly
yes,
integrated into the system, but it definitely
yes,
could be a more refined thing. There's so many ways that it could sort of measure health, and especially because it's got control of your whole body, it can measure so many different elements. So that's one.
yes,
But I think that the other important element is that you're saying here is that just because it can do all these things, we have to work out what things it shouldn't be doing because it'll actually
yes,
make you worse at your
yes.
general life.
Yes, when Tony Stark's on his adventures, whether it picks up where the kids are around and then goes, let's actually think about how we problem solve so
Mm,
that this doesn't actually impact the children in a bad way and stuff like that. So,
yeah.
um, that could be something that could be really interesting in the suit as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think these are great suggestions. I think that they got to reach out to us, and we've got plenty more where that's coming from. Um,
exactly.
Danette, did you have any final thoughts on today's conversation and the ways tech has surprised us?
And, I think tech's going to continue to surprise us.
Mm.
One quote I always share with classes is that, and I got this, and I can't remember the person who said it, but it was a great quote. So it basically said, until the 1900s, our human knowledge doubled once a century. It's currently doubling once every 13 months and is surely expected to double once every 12 minutes. So that's a huge amount of change. And, it can impact us in whether it's positive or negative. It impacts our lives. And I think one of the things that I'm taking away from today is, we can use it intentionally. So we can decide sometimes to work ourselves and instead of typing, pick up the pen and actually use our brain and light our brain up. And there'll be other times where technology will actually help us to potentially lead a better life, pick up illnesses earlier, etc., help us with sleep and stuff. So I don't think it's either good or bad. It's just it is.
Mm.
We have to be more intentional, I think, about how we make sure that it's good for the long term, not just for
Mm.
us, but all of the users, which include kids as well.
Yeah, and I think sort of piggybacking off that, I think that this is the first time that we've really been able to ask this question because it's never really
Yeah.
been something that was necessary before. But now that we've reached, feels like a kind of different stage where there's so much that we have to
Yeah.
be really careful, and we know that there can be short and long term detriments and positives to using these things. But as long as we understand that it's complicated and it's not, that we have to be aware of some things,
Yeah.
then that allows us to still use the fun of, I still go back and play my PlayStation 2 to play the old version of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 because that to me is like just because it's not the current technology doesn't mean it's bad. I actually
Yeah.
prefer it because it's not
Yeah.
connected to the internet.
Yeah.
It's not trying to get me to buy anything. It's already what it is, and I already love it for what it is. But I always think that now is a good time to start thinking about, is
Yeah,
all of this helping me, or do I need a little break? And, you can always come back to things as well.
exactly. I
Yeah,
love
and for
this.
Tony
Great
Stark,
job, Liz.
reach out.
Yeah,
Um,
we're ready when you are, Tony.
That's it. Well, Danette, thank you so much for joining me on this
Thanks,
Concept
Liz.
Sandbox. Listeners and audience, thank you so much. We are almost at episode 300. We're only a few episodes away, so stick in for that. As always, everybody, thank you so much for listening and sharing. And as always, everybody, have a magical week.
Whoa!